Today, Nigerian workers join their counterpart around the world to celebrate Workers' Day, Labor Day, or also known as the International Workers' Day. It's celebrated on May 1 every year in many countries around the world. This day is dedicated to working class and their contributions to society. The history and evolution of Labor Day is a story of the struggle and the triumph of labor movement. We have in the studio the spokesperson of the Nigerian Labour Congress, Mr. Benson Upa. It's nice to have you in the studio.
Thank you very much.
I was saying that he looks like a Gen Z worker representative when he came into the studio. And that looks nice on you, by the way.
Really?
And of course, we have Dia Ugli, public affairs analyst and civil rights activist on gender. It's a pleasure to have you in the studio, ma'am.
It's nice having me here.
A beautiful compliment, if you like, that we have in the studio. We will begin with you. I dare to say, Mr. Benson, not for the purpose of gender superiority, so that I don't fall foul of my sister's protection line.
Yeah.
It's another Workers' Day.
Yes.
And I'm sure from here you'll be prepared to join all of the activities that have been lined up to celebrate today's Workers' Day. But to put it straight, is there anything to celebrate about the 2023 Workers' Day if we take a quick x-ray of how workers have fared in the last 8 years?
Yes, thank you very much for this question. No matter how badly things have turned out to be, somehow, somewhere, there is always something good, something nice. Of course, for workers, it's been a tough period, but we are grateful to be alive. We are grateful to see this day, and these are sufficient reasons to celebrate.
Okay, but how would you say that the Nigerian workers have fared under the President Muhammadu Buhari's administration?
Well, I would say the statistics speak for themselves. First, let me start with the negative. Or do I start with the positive side of it?
Either ways.
Okay. At the moment, we have 131 million Nigerians considered to be multidimensionally poor. We have 40% unemployment rate and still growing. We have 53.4% of youth unemployment. We have 22.04% inflation rate from 21.9. We have a growing oil theft in the Delta. We have had massive devaluation of the Naira that has created uncontrollable inflation, as I've mentioned earlier on. All this have negatively impacted on the wage capacity of the worker, everything about the worker. Energy bills, utility bills have been on the rise. In fact, reached a level now where no notice is given as required by law. You recall in those days, if they were going to take light, they will give you 3 to 4 days notice that light will be taken in so place. Now nobody talks about that. Bills, the entities that run the electricity distribution just simply pile of bills. The water board slams bills. All the utility agencies all this have impacted very, very negatively and have reduced life to a bohemian, a Hobbesian level. Life is mean, brutish, and short, as it were.
Thank you. Coming to you.
However,
finish your thought.
Good. However, we should also be fair to this administration, to President Muhammad Buhari, in assessing and giving our own destiny. When he came in, he approved the release of funds to the states to enable them offset the backlog of salaries and pensions. Most of the governors that took this money put it to something else. They didn't use the money. They didn't apply the money. President Muhammad Buhari also, in the period of COVID, when the global outlook was bleak, the national outlook was equally bleak. He made sure that no worker was retrenched or laid off. Beside this, he approved the length of service for teachers from 60 years to 65 years. Recently, he has just approved a wage dash. These are some of the things that we should be appreciative of. And we're grateful to him. So it has not been one long night. So it has been night and day. This will be our take.
It's good that you bring all of these perspectives to bear. With Ms. Ogli, he said something that is instructive. I know the experience, even for labor in Nigeria, is not equal for the male and female. There seems to be some kind of discrimination lurking here and there. I will give you the opportunity to speak with that, given your background. But what has the experience been for you from the point of observation between how some of the things the presidents have done for labor versus how the governors have behaved? And to be fair, I would like to start with your own state governor, who is thinking of giving himself some wonderful sign-off in the name of gratuity and pension for ex-governors in a state where teachers are owed cumulative salaries of well over 24 months in the last 4 years. What's your assessment of how governors have behaved when it comes to workers' welfare generally?
Thank you so much. I think the governors have behaved very responsibly because the bedrock of any society lies with the workforce. Like you rightly said, in my state where I'm from, the governor has been most insensitive to the plight of the average worker in the state. Teachers have gone months on ending without being paid. There are no incentives for the workforce, and there's just a natural feeling of irresponsibility towards the workforce. And it is totally unacceptable. It should not continue. Like you said, he's working on giving himself a lifetime retirement plan. And I ask myself, how much work have you put in to want to earn so much for the rest of your life, where the average worker has not been paid, sometimes for years? So it is actually quite irresponsible and should not be encouraged going forward. That's my take.
Okay, well, a lot has happened in the past 8 years. Like you said, there are global dimensions to some of the issues that we are battling with in the country, especially if you look at the inflation. So I would direct this to you now, Mr. Benson. All the interventions of the government,
Yes.
how effective are they really in the face of all this, all that we have seen in terms of the inflation rates? And then I would also go further to say, as regards the minimum wage, where are we? Have we seen 100% implementation yet?
Well, thank you very much for this question. Well, as per the issue of interventions, we should try to, we should try to scale this up. Is this state, is this federal government you're looking at? Or we assume that this is all federal
for both of them, because we're talking about workers in the entire country.
Or for both of them?
Yes.
Well, I will start with the federal government. The federal government put in place palliative measures. Some of them which are directly under the Minister of the social welfare,
No, humanitarian.
Humanitarian welfare, and so on and so forth. And they gave out sums of money to some individuals.
They said they are indigent.
Indigent individuals. There were other initiatives, including anchor borrowers and things like this. Are the ones that, well, some people benefited from the anchor borrowers initiative. But what I would say generally is that that the spread and the depth of what they did weren't good enough. People are giving the volume of a population, more should have been given, more resources should have been allocated.
You know, I'm pointing to this because
Yes.
There are several interventions by the federal government, and you could even say that in the past, I mean, perhaps we've not seen a government that have had the highest number of social welfare interventions like we've seen in this country. But you mentioned that we have over 100 million Nigerians, 133 million Nigerians, multidimensionally poor.
Yeah.
So it means that with all these interventions,
Yes.
are we really seeing the desired results? And if not, where are we not getting it right?
Well, let me say that first and foremost, I'm not the spokesperson of this administration, but let me say that as you pointed out, it was thoughtful of the administration to have even contemplated interventions, as it were. However, as I said earlier on, those interventions were not sufficiently widespread or deep enough. And there were complaints. You remember at a point that the National Assembly caused, I call it an investigation, okay? That was suggestive of dissatisfaction with the implementation, okay? So at that level, I would say, yes, the intentions were good, but the implementation or the implementations were not sufficiently good. And time has come, in light of this, time has come for us to reflect. What did we do right? What didn't we do right? Okay? So these for me are the issues that we should begin to look.
The other leg of the question is about the minimum wage and its implementation.
Yeah, the minimum wage. Yeah, the minimum wage came into effect November 2019. And quite unfortunately, even though my sister here said the governors did well, no, I hold...
Abysmal.
No? I thought I heard her say that... I thought I heard you say that the governors that they performed well.
No.
Okay.
No, you heard wrongly.
Just give us your take. Anyways.
Okay, fine. So, quite unfortunately, some of the governors obeyed this law in the breach. The national minimum wage issue was and still remains a law, okay? And all the strata of governments, from the local government, state government to the federal, they were expected to obey this law. It was and still remains a national law. And in most countries of the world, the national minimum wage is the benchmark below which no employer is allowed to pay. Most organizations, most states pay above the national minimum wage in the United States and where this law is practiced. But quite unfortunately, many governors took delight in violating this law, did not pay. And some that paid, they paid in tranches. So, and by so doing, they deepened the poverty in their states. Now, let me share this story with you. I had an encounter with a governor in the northwestern state who wanted to stop paying the minimum wage. And I told him, I said, do you know why there is relative peace in your state? Let me tell you. It's because there is relative prosperity. See, there is a nexus between prosperity and security.
All right.
Once you take out this, once you stop paying, your state will descend into a state of anomy, like the contiguous states.
All right. At the risk of interjecting with your thoughts, I would like Mr. Blade to intervene, but in a different sort. You talked about a time for introspection. Whenever we look at the budget, one of the things that keep growing on the budget is the recurrent expenditure, wherein lies the budget for personnel in Nigeria. Nigerians who are neither employed by the state or federal government keep wondering whether they are a part of this country, because it appears that a chunk of what we earn as a country is used in servicing civil servants. And the arguments are in two folds. It feels like a very small size of our population seem to take everything that we earn as a country. And secondly, it also feels like Nigerians, you and I who are not in public and civil service, do not get value for some of these payments that are made. And they also feel like there is just too many of them, in fact, that we can do with just a third of the size of our civil service. What's your take on these arguments out there?
Looking at it very critically, the arguments out there are quite in order, they're in place. Because when you look at it, in all the economies of the world, Nigeria happens to be one of those that have the highest
bureaucracy.
Yes. And it is not trickling down. When you earmark so much for so little, the average man, the average worker, does not feel the impact. In public service, for example, we have all manners of schedule that ought not to be. These schedules could be collapsed if we are looking at public service the world over. There are different arms of governance, public service, that ought not to be so multifaceted. And in being multifaceted, it comes with a lot of expenditure, which could, ordinarily, I don't know if that's the word I should use, but which could best be put to other uses. And those uses could affect day-to-day lives of the workers. He was saying something about, you talked about palliatives and things. What would have stopped the government? You know how many staffs you have per establishment. It failed because it didn't go through the right channels. In this establishment, we know how many people are employed herein. Take this establishment, for example. Palliatives want to come in here. You know who gets what and who shouldn't get what. You don't just make it on a blanket. The palliatives were distributed from Australia to Togo. from America. It was a global thing. So why was ours different? Bureaucracies. And this has to be looked into very critically in the years to come, especially as we are transiting from one administration onto the other.
Okay.
Yes, I'd like to respond to the issues you just mentioned.
Okay.
First, I hold a contrary view that so much is given to those in the public service to the exclusion of others. First, I do agree that in relation to the overall population, those in the public service are relatively a relative minority. But I do not believe that the allocations to those career public servants are the issue, because the facts and figures are there. How much is voted for their wages? First of all, how many are they? Yeah, we're talking about a country of about over 200 million. How many people are in public service? If we do a census of this,
maybe 40 million or so, 50 million. How many workers do you have, attached to an office?
So just a moment. If you do a census of this, you'll be surprised. Let's take the example of the police. We are told that we are under-policed. We are under-soldiered too. We are virtually, practically in all the services, our numbers in relation to the public, our numbers are low. But look at how much is actually voted. So the issue is not these career public servants. The issue is the political heads. Okay. So I'm coming. Just a moment. If you get to look at how much those political heads take, you'll be shocked. So the fact is there in the open. Go and take a look. What is what percentage does the salary of this, or do the salaries of these entities constitute?
Okay, well, I think that the argument is about how much does the ordinary Nigerian benefit from the national cake, sort of, the quote national cake. So Mike Owanko talked about when we look at the budgetary allocations, and for most times you see that recurrent expenditure takes a chunk of it.
And then we're not going to separate it from career and non-career.
You don't see that much investment in terms of capital projects that is meant to benefit the larger population of the people. But let me bring it down to the NLC, for instance.
Yes.
For most times that we talk about welfare of staff, it's always almost about people in the public service. How much attention or how much focus is given to private sector workers, for instance? I mean, we have people who work hours on end today, some of them without salaries, some of them their employers pay at will. Sometimes there is no arrangements for their perhaps pensions or health schemes and the rest of it. So as a labor union, how much attention does the labor union give to people in the private sector?
To its members.
First and foremost, I think there is a misuse of term here when you say private sector. The private sector is better organized than the public sector.
Okay.
But we're talking labor in general.
Listen, madam, listen. The private sector is better organized and better paid than people in the public sector. Except
that can be debated.
I'm trying to explain something to you which will be useful to you. Except you are talking about the informal sector. If you are talking about the informal sector, where the rules are a little bit unsteady, sometimes there are no rules at all. That you may have a point there. But if you're talking about the organized private sector, the organized private sector prides itself as as a golden eye of everything.
Okay, so
the people. In fact, let me tell you.
When you talk, because it's almost. There's a very thin line between. Tell me any employee in the organized private sector who is not paid and is working. There's a very thin line between the informal sector nowadays and the organized private sector, because it's almost difficult to say, oh, this is organized private. So you take teachers, for instance, who work in private schools, for instance. You say they are working in a private, or you say they are working in organized private sector. And if you see some of the treatments of these teachers in private schools, you know, sometimes it's really nothing to be proud of. It leaves a lot to be desired.
Just to add
that's
to
just
that
an instance.
point,
Would you say they are working in informal sector now, or how?
Just to give you one more example, the banks, casualization of staffs, contract appointments that denies them of pension, denies them of health insurance
benefits,
and they work under very severe. So does the structure we have today better serve the interests of workers in those kind of establishment?
Well, if you are talking about inherent labor issues in certain organizational spaces, that is a different matter. We can deal with that. But if you are saying that the organized private sector is a marginalized sector, I'll keep telling you, I say no. That the organized private sector, Shell and the rest, they're all part of the organized private sector. And they are very, 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 in terms of pay, remuneration, and those, they are way ahead of the public sector. But if you are now restricting your question to unhealthy labor practices in certain entities in the private sector, I will agree with you. Like the banks, for instance, yes, we have had massive cases of casualization in the banks, and we'll be tackling this. We have that in the construction industry. We'll be tackling this. In fact, in the most recent tour of the unions by the president of the Congress, Comrade Joe Ajero, he made it amply clear to the unions that he visited. Say, look, we are reconstituting the anti-casualization committee to drive home the message that casualization is not allowed. It's not the right way to go. So Congress has consistently taken a very strong view of unhealthy labor practices like casualization.
What about remuneration? What about benefits?
If you're talking about remuneration in the private sector,
you know,
and I'm telling you, take this from me. Even the banks where you have unhealthy practices, if you're looking at the issue of the pay, they pay better. But casualization is an issue. Pension issues are an issue.
They pay better.
So try to separate them.
No. Yeah, exactly.
We seem to be lumping up things, really. And I think that it will help us in the conversation if we, not talk about maybe banks, or maybe we are just talking about unhealthy, you mentioned it, unhealthy labor practices. And that exists,
But that was not the direction of your question. That was not the direction of your question.
We are talking about unhealthy labor practices, whether in the informal sector, whether in the organized private sector, like you put it. Unhealthy labor practices exist in different places. But what I'm saying is that the attention of labor, for instance, seems to be more focused on people working in the public sector. Each time there is...
That is not true.
That's why you are here.
That is not true.
Each time there is disagreement between government, that's where we hear labor. But how about people who are not working in the public civil service? So, and that's why you're here. Tell us.
I'll tell you. I'm listening, and I'll tell you.
The focus of labor. How much has been done to look at, say, for instance, I'm giving an instance with schools now, for instance. Private schools now, for instance, where you see this unhealthy labor practices. What is the labor doing in that regard?
Are you ready to listen to me now?
Go ahead.
First and foremost, the private sector unions are as many, if not more than the public sector unions that constitute the umbrella known as NLC. That should tell you that NLC is a broad-based labor center, the leading pan-Nigeria organization. So any issue that affects any of these unions, NLC takes it upon itself. You see, NLC does not even have any choice. The issue of the banks, we have fought and we're still fighting. The issue of the teachers that you mentioned, yes, we have a union known as the Nigerian Union of Teachers.
And the TUC.
But also take note,
Whatever.
it is often easier for NLC to intervene where there is a union. Okay? It's always easier. Where there is no union, what NLC does is to encourage unionization. Okay? So, but there must, oftentimes, there has to be that initiative of having a union. And take note of this too. If those who are negatively affected, like you mentioned, teachers in private institutions and so forth, if they do not show any inclination of forming a union, or if they do not run to NLC, NLC will not throw itself.
No, but NLC should go to them. Labor.
Why?
You see, why not?
Why?
Why not?
I have this question as
Why not?
Ask me.
I ask this question as follow-up, and I would like to start with Mr. Glee to sort of offer a perspective, and perhaps you'll find the room to respond. One of the other grievances held by several other Nigerians who are not members of the NLC, either by affiliation or directly, is the fact that in the recent years, the NLC has also made itself a tool against reforms that are considered to be in the general public interest, but not in the interest of the NLC, because some of its staff members will be retrenched. Like, we know how, that's what I'm saying. I've said, like, I wanted to end with an example.
Yeah.
Like reforms in the oil sector. The NLC has completely stood against any attempt at privatization, any attempt at a conversation around subsidy removal and all of that, because for them, the privatization, because for them it will lead to retrenchment. But we have now had refineries where people have moved from ordinary staff to directorate position between the year 2000 and today without those establishments producing any ounce of petroleum. Is that the kind of economy that will sustain the plight of workers, or is that what we yearn for? I would like your perspective on that before he responds. You've been talking for a while. I just want a perspective.
Much more than anything else, taking it from the stance of the NLC, I think the NLC has fallen short. I'm sorry to say.
You're entitled to your opinion.
Because much more than anything else, when we talk about labor, we're talking about everybody who is engaged in service provision. Service provision. Organized, unorganized, formal, informal. That's why it's called labor. Whatever arm, it is the responsibility of the labor council or whatever to look out for them. Be it the vulcanizer. He said something. They always want to, work around unions. But then, what if they don't even know? What if they don't know? Everybody must not be, a white collar labor provider before you identify with them, and then, like you rightly said, quoting you, a bit of the national cake. It's not done in other economies, even third world economies like us. It's not done in Ghana. So for crying out loud, Nigerian Labour Congress, as it is, has not actually lived up to its responsibility when it comes to yes, that's one. Two, like you asked the question, they have been compromised because they look at it like, oh, if this happens, if we delve into this more, our members are going to be out of jobs. So they're not even looking at the overall benefit for all Nigerians. For all Nigerians. You took, a piece out of the bulk by saying oil subsidy, privatization. What are these bringing to the table for us? As the labor, you should go into that
nitty-gritty.
Excuse me.
Oh, okay.
For all Nigerians.
All right, so let's give this time to...
Well, thank you very much, Madam. You'll be most callous with your language, but I will not respond in the same whatever, that will be compromised, that we will not live up to expectations, all of that. Yet, if a leaf drops today, you will say, where is labor? Why don't you call another organization if you've not been living up to our expectations? But but coming to the specific issues that the two of you have raised, you talked about saying that we have been anti-reform. Well, that is an unfair comment. We have not been anti-reform, but we are not for fraudulent reforms. You see, with the collapse of the bipolar world in the late 80s and early 90s, market took a predominance, took an eminent position, virtually across the world, including Nigeria. And when they started market reforms here, we said, learn your lesson from what has happened in other climes. Don't just go market because going market is the fad of the moment.
If you can wrap up, sir. Because
they didn't listen. No, this is very fundamental. Yeah. Give me time.
Yeah,
they didn't listen.
We don't have the time. That's the thing. So
they didn't listen. I mean, they privatized energy. What do you have today?
We have to discuss.
What do you have today? And then two, they say that we're against the privatization of the oil sector. We said no, we are not. We said for you to privatize or to deregulate the downstream sector of the oil something, do A, B, C, D. Build refineries, fix these refineries. Let there be competition between publicly owned refineries and the privately owned. As I speak with you, we have done documents, well-researched documents, and submitted to government on what to do. Subsidy is a scam. Even the president, before he was sworn in president, said that he didn't believe in subsidy. Okay. Just a moment. So, okay. Subsidy, and for those of you who are advancing, who have become converts of market fundamentalism, it is coming. When you start buying fuel at the price of 1,000 naira a liter, you start appreciating the Nigerian Labour Congress.
Thank you very much, Mr. Benson. I wish we had more time to continue to drill into several aspects. I just need to put on records that there are various perspectives on these issues and arguments, and all of us seek a better Nigeria, regardless of what side of the divide we are sitting. Thank you very much for showing up, Mr. Benson. I hope we will have time to continue this conversation after today. Mrs. Ogley, thank you very much for showing up and for bringing this team